body image is our thoughts, feelings, our perceptions about our bodies, and even how attractive we feel we are. Hi, my name's Aaron. I'm a therapist with Perch Therapy and Mediation. Perch is a team of therapists. We're a neurodiversity affirming practice supporting individuals and couples with relationships, compulsive sexual behaviors, eating disorders, and more. Before we had language and before we had logical thinking, we had the felt sense. We had our bodily sensations, which is interesting because Alexander Lowen said our connection to the earth and our connection to our bodies is our connection to reality. And when we think about it, that body-to-body connection is the first type of connection that we really know. And on the subject of reality, when someone has been through trauma and they begin to dissociate, they begin to disconnect or withdraw from reality, what also happens? They tend to withdraw, disconnect from their own bodies, which is why you find someone who's been traumatized or someone who dissociates, they'll find it difficult to tell you what they're feeling. One of the first evidences of a lack of self-love is that we begin to abuse our bodies. Culture has a massive impact on how we feel about our body. For context, if we start with women, I want you to think of the ideal, the typical standard of beauty for a woman in Western society today. What does that type of body look like? Now I want to show you something called the Venus of Willendorf. This little statue is the oldest figurine of a woman that we have. It's dated to around 30,000 years old. Take a look at these proportions. Where is the fat located? What's exaggerated? Think of the difference between what must have been valuable to them in those times. And it's said where parts of the body are exaggerated that represent fertility, it's likely to have depicted a deity. And when we think of a deity, we think of the ideal. And that's going to be important because I will be speaking about the worship of the female body in a different context. Diane Barthel wrote a great book called Keeping Up Appearances. And in a part of that book, she spoke about how young girls would see the endorsements from celebrities. And those young girls notice that they're all beautiful. As these girls are growing up, they realize consumer culture's worship of female youth and beauty. They see the compliments that they get are usually, you should be an actress or you should be a model. And they begin to think, this must be the pinnacle of female success. This is how I'm going to be acceptable to society. This is what my body needs to be. There's a book called Biting the Hand That Starves You on anorexia. And a part of that book was sharing, as we see Western values and culture spreads, so does the prevalence of eating disorders. It just shows how much the pressure from society can change the way millions of people feel about themselves, and as a result, the way they treat themselves, the way they act, the way they eat, their sexual habits. On the subject of sex, only 5% of women fit the standard for a model in the US. And according to Dr. Tammy Nelson, most women polled said they would actually be having more sex if they felt better about their bodies. Dr. Tammy Nelson also noted that in our culture, while women tend to feel pressure to get smaller, to shrink themselves, men feel pressure to be bigger, to be taller, to have a larger penis, to be more muscular. Men also receive negative messages about their bodies from society. One of these areas is from porn. Research has shown that when they begin to compare their bodies with what they see on porn, men tend to feel a lot more negative about their penis size. Interestingly, the same effect didn't happen with women and breast size. When we think about other negative messages men might receive, we think about the jokes. There's short man syndrome. There's small dick energy. What do these say to a man about his acceptableness? What must that do to someone who doesn't meet those standards? These anxieties around acceptability, just like the women in the poll who said they would have more sex if they felt better about their bodies, men who become extremely anxious about their penis size can start to withdraw from sexual encounters altogether. Who has injected us with such shame about the vehicle that we use to experience life? I showed you the Venus of Willendorf, so let's take a look at a male equivalent. Take a look at his penis size. I think it's relevant that this is ancient Greece because Greek culture is related to our culture. Give or take some bits and bobs, it goes Greece, Rome, England, America. That's the lineage. In ancient Greece, larger penises were mocked. Smaller penises were the ideal. And in a similar way, I wonder back to the Venus of Willendorf, were smaller women mocked, while larger women were applauded? I think it's worth emphasizing that while I'm using the examples of a smaller woman as the ideal and a larger man as the ideal, it's subjective to our cultures, because there are cultures that prize bigger women and perhaps mock smaller women, which causes their own insecurities. And I'm not aware of a culture that praises a smaller man, but there are peoples where the average height is a lot smaller. So it is subjective. However, the point remains, the messages that we receive about our bodies influences how we feel about our bodies, and that in turn changes how we treat our bodies. Going back to that felt sense, those bodily sensations, that first thing that we knew, how a baby is handled tells a baby a lot about how it should feel about itself. Is it handled delicately? Is it handled as though the parent is afraid? Is it handled with rage or aggressively? That informs how the baby feels about itself, and how we handle ourselves can do the same. Changing the way our bodies look doesn't necessarily change how we perceive our bodies, but changing how we treat our bodies can change how we feel within it. Research has shown that when shown pictures of their bodies, people with eating disorders tended to look more at the body parts that they found unlikable. They tended to look at them and judge them harshly, negatively. But here's what your body needs: appreciation, even those parts that you hate. If you're in a partnered relationship or you have a sexual partner, I can't speak for everyone, but sometimes those parts of their body that they're most shy about need the most love, needs the most special attention, needs the most encouragement. And it's the same way we have to treat ourselves. And I'll give you an example. I always hated my hand size. I have fairly petite hands for a man, and when I would walk, I used to hide them because people would make jokes and I would think they would look at me and think certain things about me, and it would be embarrassing. But even when people would compliment my hands, I wouldn't believe them. But it's not until I could appreciate that these are my hands. These are the things that allow me to feel the world around me. I became able to appreciate my hands, to look at them and to feel them and to appreciate what they're capable of. And I want to leave with this poem that I hope inspires you to begin to actively appreciate your body and and what it does for you, in spite of the messages that society tries to put on you.
I took out my cornrows, and wouldn't you know, I have what I call a mini afro. Home to a comb, soft to the touch. It makes me so happy. I love it so much. My hair is teaching lessons we all should know. Whatever we nourish will soon surely grow.